Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button and keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are on Saturday, September 30th. We're going to take a look at 6 stocks today. We're going to kick things off with EBET, flip over to CGC NIO RVLP NVOS, and finish things off with GOEV. Now for each of these stocks, we're going to start here in the Webull, add in any levels or tweak any levels or trend lines that we want to, and then we'll zoom into the intraday to see how it acted on Friday, and then we will flip over to the Think or Swim study and see how things are situated there, and then we will proceed to the next stock. Now I will timestamp all of these in the description below, so just expand that and click on the stock or stocks that you'd like to watch if you don't want to see all of them. Okay, so EBET. EBET continues its wild ride. It was down 39% on Friday, and it's put itself now squarely into the realm of, ranges where we don't have price points for support and resistance. We didn't plot any below 5 cents previously, and now we're at 3 cents, and it had spent this time here, and it for a period it was just treating 5 cents as resistance, so we didn't worry too much about it. But now that it's sort of pushed through back into our range above 8 cents and now drawn back to 3, I think we should put some in here in case it sort of spends some time in this realm, and I don't know that it will, because it has such a ridiculous history of just incredibly wild price action. But we will we'll do what we can to prepare for whatever may come. I'm going to put a level in here at 464. You see all this topping out. You see previous support try to hold over here, and wick down in this level even. And let's just work our way down from there. There's going to be quite a few. It's a little choppy in here, but not too bad. 4.4. That's 4.4 cents. So, to be clear, not 44 cents. What do we got here? Yeah, these look very tight in. It'll make sense more so when we zoom into the intraday. It's just going to look crowded on the daily because the price point is so low and there's so many levels, and so it's going in as fractions of pennies. But that's just what happens when you have a ton of wild price action, where it's zipping up and zipping down, double-digit percentages several days per week or month. And I'm recording in a slightly different area of the house today, so hopefully the sound comes through okay. My table is a little bit wobbly, so you might hear a little tip tap here and there. This is actually a pretty good level, not just because it's near the bottom on Friday, but you see top of this candle body, near bottom of this candle body, near wick on this candle here. So that's actually a pretty good one. And then I guess we'll go. Let me just try to pin it to the bottom of this wick for now, for lack of more price action. And then the bottom of this candle body. So I'll go, and then while we're here, we might as well note this 271 level, previous low points. Okay, so there's a lot of levels there. There's a few gaps here, not literal gaps, but gaps where we don't have a ton of price points. But if we zoom into the intraday, you can see how this sort of takes shape. So yes, it's still a lot of levels to look at if you're zoomed in intraday, but that's because the price is going through almost 40% shift. So you are in an expanded area. Some of these might not last very long, right? This is a very crowded area, so I'd be curious to know if some of these sort of strip away. Like this is really just kind of catching this wick, but not really much of anything else. So we'll see if that one persists. But if you were coming into the open on Friday, you would have seen it trying to hold support over 5, which is the previous level that we had. And then what it was doing before that we were talking about was it was just treating 5 as resistance, prior to it pushing up toward 8. But what happened here at open is just a huge slip, and it slipped right through that 464, tried to catch the 444, and then just slipped right through that as well, and then shucked a bunch of levels, and then tried to build a base here at 378, slipped that one as well, and tried to catch here at 338, and then had to come down here and basically build over 315, catching resistance to that 338 late in the day, and sort of finishing the day off as support over that 315. So we'll see if that holds coming into Monday, what that looks like. If not, we have levels down there at 3 and at 288 and so on that we can pay attention to. Now flipping over to the Think or Swim study, just keep in mind this is on the hour, so we're looking at a different time frame here. But most importantly, to my mind, we have a few triggers and fires here. Not much happened on that trigger and fire, comparatively speaking. But on this trigger here, we had all of this sideways action, and then it fired on this huge candle. So really good call out there in the TTM squeeze indicator for the second trigger and fire. Maybe actually the third, because we see a trigger and fire here. So sometimes when these stocks get really wild, the triggers and fires sort of end up coming together in groups. And what I mean by that is you will have 1 or 2 trigger and fires that don't do much of anything, right? These didn't do a ton. This one, did some. That's probably a pretty big percentage change, to be honest. It just doesn't look like it because this was such a drop off on Friday. But this trigger and fire was, a really good one to catch. So this called it out from triggering up in like the 5-cent range, and then obviously peeling down all the way. So it basically caught the whole move on the trigger and the fire. We see still expanding bearish momentum into close on Friday. So we'll see what that looks like as, like I said, things come up on Monday. It's trying to sidestep its way back into the channel. We'll see if it wicks off of this red wave cloud, which this is another proof point of how strong the bearish momentum is, that the wave cloud has stretched out below the lower bound of the channel. That's sort of one proof point. Another one is if the price action hits resistance on the wave cloud and can't even get into the channel, that's another indicator of more bearish momentum that's going to need to be played out. At some point, I don't know when or what the price is when this happens, but at some point we look for it to try to make its way into the channel, either by just moving sideways and the channel coming down to it, or it being able to make some upward motion and press toward the mid-range of that channel. So who knows if that comes as part of another wild swing or what exactly that looks like. But the main things I'm going to be looking for on this study on Monday are, does it remain outside of the channel? If so, is it treating that wave cloud as resistance? And it's only has so much further to go, right? It's at 3 cents, so at some point it runs out of pennies. So I don't know, but that's what I'm looking at the moment. And then obviously on the Webull side of things, these levels here. All right, flipping over to CGC. I don't need the news story. Just give me the chart. And so we're up here. We're still in areas where we have stuff on the chart, but we do have, a bit of a price gap here where we didn't have levels. But now that some additional price action has come in, we do have some good levels. This is a really good level. This candle body, near miss on this candle body, this wick, and this wick. So really happy with this level, 7636. So finishing off Friday at 7828, this is going to be the nearest in support that I see, and not really another very good level to get from below there yet. Now there is one, I think, to get from above there. Let me just zoom in a little bit here. Yeah, it's a little hard to see. Let me see if I pin this to the bottom of here. Okay, so this is probably okay enough for now. this might shift a little bit, but right now I'd look at 80.72. So here's the two levels that I'd see immediately above and below, depending on which way the price wants to go, and assuming it doesn't sort of open the day already having pushed through one of these levels, though you could watch it in the pre-market, obviously. To the upside, 80.72, I'd be interested to see what it does with that. To the downside, 76.36, I'd be interested to see what it does there. Now, if we zoom in and see what this looked like intraday, if we had this chart, you would have seen coming into the day, well, let's just start previous day. It's good to sort of understand where you were coming from as you're coming into the day. Basically double topped here as it tried to stretch this 86 cent range, slipped a level here, caught support at 80, and then built support over 82.50 coming into close, sort of. It slipped it at the very end of the day. So then trying to build over that 81-ish level and getting trapped between that and the 82. Lost that right at open. Came down, didn't quite need the 76.36, but caught 77, and then started making some higher lows there. Attempted push up over 80, couldn't hold it at all, really. This candle could have tricked you if you were looking for a quick move, but your trade would have quickly been stopped out here if you were playing it smartly. Resistance confirmed there, and then pushed back again toward this 77 range. Seemed to be sort of the floor that was building, that high 77 range, so maybe a little bit closer to 78 was what it was trying to put in on Friday. So that could be an interesting motion if that's sort of meaning like, yes, it's making some lower highs, right? We had highs up here coming into Thursday, and then Thursday highs diminished, and then Friday's highs diminished even further. But it was also holding the same level. You see here, this low here was 77. Right, and then if we zoom over here, this low here was 77. So sort of a double-edged sword. Yes, it's holding that well. I do worry how many times buyers will continue to show up at that level if the price keeps pushing back down there, especially if that price is pushing down after making lower highs. So that'll be the question that I'll have going into Monday if the price is still in this range. Good news at that 77 level as it pertains to that, is it going and expecting buyers to show up there too often? It's wicking up strongly off of that level, right? This is a big, strong wick up. This was a big, strong wick up and almost an identical motion. Then, a couple candles later puts in a higher low. A couple candles later puts in a higher low, and then sort of tries to push. But again, those pushes are being met with selling pressure sooner. So that's sort of the question on the convergence. What happens when those two things collide? Needing buyers to show up at 77 while sort of returning to that level more often because the highs that you're putting in between are lower. I want to take a quick look at short interest here and see where things are. So this is as of, this is very old data. This is as of 8/31. For some reason, there's not even the September 15th data in here, but shorts, still relative to the stock, staying pretty high. I didn't open up anything to see what percentage of the float this is, but just sort of noting here that there's been a little bit of a die-off throughout the year, from the beginning of the year, but it's sort of picking back up / maybe stabilizing a little bit. So just something to note there. Think or Swim study at CGC. This is going to be on the 1-hour chart, FYI. So holding in the channel here, as the moves haven't been that crazy in the last couple of days, at least with its ability to stay in the channel, but this is a full stretch within just a few candles from top of the channel all the way through to the bottom of the channel. So like that's pretty roller coastery, and then tested the mid-range, which is what this blue line is here, pushed right back to the lower bound of the channel, tested the mid-range here. So it's struggling a little bit to test the mid-range, but at the same time it's not getting pushed down consistently. Like it's not just riding the lower bound of the channel, right? So it's not caught under that much bearish pressure, but it certainly is in a wave of bearish pressure. But I'd be interested to see at some point one of those battles I would assume is going to win. That either it's going to just get caught and pushed strongly and sort of pinned down to the lower bound of the channel and have sort of a stronger bearish momentum play out, or it's going to pin itself or even get support over the mid-range of this channel, and that's will be where it sort of either starts to stabilize or starts to try to reverse trend and move, make some motion upward. All right, flipping over to NIO as I take a little sip of my coffee. NIO here is on the daily, showing trying to go for a full retracement here, it looks like. Now, I don't know that it will. There's this gap here to keep in mind from 960. It would enter the gap to the upside, and it would fill that at about 1022. So something to keep in mind as it gets into the $9 range, that's sort of hanging out there as a potential area for it to try to work through. Lately, for whatever reason, as I've been watching the gaps, there's not been a lot of gaps that stocks have been sort of flying through. They've been getting sort of a lot of sticky price action, especially trying to get into the gap. So I'd be interested to see if that 960 level, as it tries to get into the gap, if it works its way up there, how sticky that gets and how many times it needs to try to push that level to really get into that range. But if it is able to move through there, we do have a 988 resistance level that we would expect it to hit in the interim on its way to 1022, but we could sort of see how that takes shape. Now, we're only a few candles in, but come mid next week or so, if we're continuing to put in some higher lows here, I do see a nice potential for an uptrend here. And maybe as we pass through some of these resistance levels and or gap levels, that we could sort of flat top out, right? A nice uptrend support meeting a resistance level and then sort of a pop through. Sorry, you're going to hear some birds in the background there. That is sort of something that I'd like to see a few more candles get put in. We get into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. We could see how that's continued to take shape. And if it's there, it's there. I tend to think if you draw them in too early, they cause more problems than they help. So that's why I'm reluctant to putting in additional ones in. We do have some decent gaps in these areas. I'll put one here just because this is such a stark gap. Put a level there at 1116. If and when we get more price action in there, there's certainly additional levels. Like here's probably one around 1086. But it's just going to clutter up the chart at this point, and we're not there yet. And NIO's not had these like wild days of moving up like 50, 60, 80%. So we probably have some time to get there. But we definitely have some gaps in the ranges that we could fill in if the price starts to settle into certain areas. Now, looking here at the day, if you come Thursday into Friday, Thursday you would have seen it building over 843, nice push, initial resistance here at 880. Just a slight dip, didn't even need to come anywhere close to trying to reconfirm support at 843, and then a clear push through 880 into the after hours. Now it didn't come down, I guess on this wick it did come down and confirm support, but no sort of clearer motion back to confirm support. And so when it hit resistance on this 923, that's what I would have looked for. Like, is it going to come down to confirm 880 support? It didn't quite need it on Friday. It came down here 887 or so, about where it was building this floor here, this sort of slight swing low after that pretty solid move up on Thursday. So maybe it's kind of moving itself away from this 880 level. Maybe it's just sort of an indication that there's additional bullish momentum that's working itself out, and it could be a good sign for the bulls that that's what's continuing to kind of take place. A higher swing high here at 930. Now, granted, this is a lower swing high here and here, but I think there's a broader motion to be putting in. So I'm not too worried about it, as you had also a higher low here intraday on Friday. So I'm interested to see how that kicks off in the week ahead. Now let's flip over here to NIO, and this is going to be on that 1 hour chart, just to be clear. just to get a sense of where we are in the hour, you do have this 180 to 200 EMA cloud swooping in to provide resistance for the time being. Now, if it is able to flip that resistance to support, that could offer some additional support. It's also not exactly in line with, but pretty close to the mid-range of the channel here, which is situated about $9 at the moment, give or take. And, we do see nice motion here. It was even up out of the channel for periods on Thursday and coming into Friday. But then what do we always look for? We look for it to revert and test the mid-range of the channel, that bright blue line that I was just talking about. And it did that on Friday, held support nicely. So from a bullish perspective, you do see the bullish momentum dying down here in the TTM squeeze indicator. But this to me actually looks like a pretty solid motion. And I'd be, like I said, I'm interested to see where it picks things up on Monday. Does it lose that bullish momentum now that it's died down on the TTM squeeze indicator? An indication of that would be that it flips this mid-range support to resistance and pushes down toward the lower bound of the channel. Or, if I'm just looking at the price action and ignoring the indicator, this is a nice bullish motion to me. Spend quite a bit of time out of the channel, and then when it comes down to test the mid-range, it holds it really well. Now, the other question is this cloud that's right here, right? The cloud is sort of squeezing the price action between the mid-range of the channel and itself. Is that going to be very strong pressure? Obviously, it wasn't able to hold support of that level here, so the first attempt to breach it failed. So that's going to be the question, is that because there's very strong resistance there? We'll have to sort of wait until Monday to see how that plays out. All right, second half of the video. Sip of coffee. RVLP, I'm not familiar with. It came on my radar because it had, a wild day on Friday. This doesn't really capture the full move because it had an enormous move up and then it peeled back some throughout the day. But I mean, at some point, this was up. What was the high of the day? 1280. So the previous day it had a low of 755. So, huge percentage change there. Certainly not just 10, 11%. And you see even there in the after hours, running back up another 30%. So I thought we'd come in, put some levels on because we don't have anything on the chart here. I don't think there's anything previously to look at. Let me look at the monthly here. Yeah, so we're at a low point at the moment, or it's trying to bounce off of a low point. So let's put some levels in here, and then we'll zoom in, see if there's any additional levels that we want to add, and then we'll flip over to the think or swim study. I'd also be curious, we don't have this data just yet, but how much sort of short sellers may be pouring in with such a big move. But that's not necessarily unique to this stock. That would be the question with any stock that's sort of at a low point, was sort of looking like the doom factor was approaching, and then has a pretty significant run up in a day. All right, so those are some levels. I passed through so many levels here, obviously. It's going to be quite a few to put in, but let's see what we can do. And then we'll zoom in and we'll see if we had those levels on the chart, what they could have told us, which then just might give us info for the week ahead in case it continues to move, have crazy days, what have you. This one's a little tricky. But one maybe there kind of split the difference, which is always quite questionable. But then there's the low, obviously. Now it did wick up through these levels, so we should put some a little bit higher. Kind of a double wick almost, not quite here and here. Close, but not quite. But sort of interesting. Oh, it is, top of this candle body for sure. Let's see, we have a little bit of additional price action that we can pick up on over here, which is helpful. Oh yeah, very helpful. That's a very good level right there at 1347. And then it gets kind of thin again just because the candle bodies are so big. This is, for having limited motion through there, that 1397, which might act more like a psychological 14 level, is potentially pretty decent for what it is. Okay, so we get a couple levels above where we wicked on Friday, so I feel good about that. So let's see. If we had this on the map, we would have seen this coming in on Friday, settling in here over this 1146 level and kind of batting itself around, slipping a bunch of levels. And then, yeah, a few sort of retracements to I slipped a level, come back, confirm resistance. I slip a bunch of levels, try to flip from resistance to support, kind of wrestled with this 935 range, so that might start to play additional importance in the days ahead. We'll see. But yeah, wrestled with that quite a bit, and then when it lost, it sort of settled on this 864 into close, but then, a big rise up after close, again, confirming here on the wicks off of that 935, so strong motion off of that, was accumulating here on 1012, and then motion up to 1095, trying to stretch toward that 1146, but either got clocked out or the bulls got burnt out. But obviously some good motion there. We do see throughout the day, sometimes I try to get a grip on the volume. That first candle sort of throws everything off a little bit, but really the high points of the day at any sort of like chunk were really the sell volume, except for then right into close. So that sort of uptick after hours, maybe not super shocking given that, but this intraday peel down, a bunch of profit taking seems sort of logical given the incessant standing out of the volume on the bearish candles. Flipping over here, RVLP. All right, now this is on the 1 hour chart. Keep in mind. So what we look for, if you're unfamiliar with this study, a couple of things. We look at the channel, and I'll talk about the particulars of what we look for in the channel in a sec. But here on the TTM squeeze indicator, we look at that as well. So let's start with the channel. If something leaves the channel, we look for it to revert to the mid-range of the channel. That's that bright blue line in here. Now, it obviously left the channel before market even opened on Friday, and then it quickly reverted to the mid-range of the channel. Now, what we look for when it does that is, what does it do? Does it pin itself to it? Does it confirm resistance and move through it? Does it confirm support and continue on its bullish way? Here, it sort of pinned itself to it. Now, I know it's underneath it, but it's not really having much additional motion underneath it. It just sort of pinned itself below the mid-range of the channel and this lower mid-bound, this mid-low bound of the channel. This is the low bound, this is the up bound, and then we have a mid for each of those. But the interesting thing here is then it came through with a strong motion, right? This is also pretty lackluster motion. It's just relatively flat. I know it's moving slightly downward, but it's relatively flat compared to the big movement that we saw throughout the day and in the after hours. So when we returned to big motion, which was after hours, what we saw was a strong candle through the mid-range, testing this. It's kind of hard to see here, but you see this little cloud right here. This is the 180 to 200 EMA cloud. So testing that, sort of hit resistance off of it, but then the next big candle confirmed support, or is trying to hold support for the first time. Again, it's hard to tell because it got clocked out, but it's trying to hold support for the first time over the mid-range of the channel, while also trying to settle the candle body above that 100 to 200 EMA cloud. So, sorry, 180 to 200 EMA cloud. I knew something sounded a little bit wrong there. But, that's sort of interest to me to see what that looks like as we get in to Monday. We'll probably have quite a bit of info if the volume is still there in the pre-market hours. It'll sort of elucidate further. Is this push up real, or is it going to kind of get pinned here, or is it going to slip back, and this will have just been sort of like a little blip, an attempted run at getting support, but it's really going to sell back off again. Now, the other thing to note, if we zoom back out for a sec, is TTM squeeze, good call out here on the indicator. Big trigger period with all these red dots, and then when it fired, it caught that move from about 7-8 cents all the way up to that 23-cent mark as it was firing. And then, quit, but it was super quick motion, right? Super quick bullish momentum died down and then flipped to increasing bearish momentum throughout the day. That was that sort of like flat, kind of pin itself, but move slightly down motion that we were just talking about. And then again, who knows, because it got timed out, but this was appearing as though maybe the bearish momentum was going to start dying down and maybe revert toward the baseline of the histogram here. Now, I don't know if that will continue. We're going to have to wait and see, because again, it just got timed out. So it was sort of an unnatural occurrence, if you will. It got sniped. So we're just going to have to see when things kick back in again, what that full motion looks like. But that is RVLP as I see it at the moment. Pretty interesting situation. I'm going to take a sip of coffee here before we flip over to NVOS. All right, NVOS we've been tracking for a little bit of time. So we have quite a few levels on the chart here, quite a few where it's still moving through. We have a few gaps where we didn't have enough action to really put in levels with confidence. That might kind of still be the case. I'd feel okay putting a level in here for now. We'll sort of see how it continues to act. I'll put it right here because we can at least capture these candle bodies and these wicks as well, and these candle bodies and these not wicks, but these candle bodies as well. 1E and 2E. 2664 is that level. So we do see it stretching up, and there's a gap that it has to fill. What's happening here? This is an indication that there's a gap here. Okay, so there's a gap here, just to be clear, and it hasn't quite filled it yet. This has gone up to 53.84, and the gap fill looks like it's up there at 61.09 ish. So it's fallen short. It's had really good strong motion through the gap, but it got stuck, didn't quite fill the gap. So I'm curious, is it gonna sort of re-pursue that gap? Is it going to treat the lower bound of the gap as resistance now, which would potentially not be a good sign for the bulls? What's it going to do there? It's sort of pretty interesting situation. It also has a bunch of gaps below that have yet to be filled. We see one here, and we see one down here. So we'll see what happens with those levels. But we haven't put anything in the gap yet. Let me see if anything. Yeah, so there's a level here that I'd say. Not a bunch of price action to go off of, obviously, but in the little bit that we have, I would say there's a level there. And then maybe also a level here, but that gets really, really hard. Just gets very crowded and almost hard to see to put the level in. We'll put one here as well, on 42.78. The additional level that I'm wondering on is sort of right here, 3886-ish. But I'm going to hold off on that for now. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to hold off on this one too. So let's zoom in, see what we have. So that gray, so here's that gap. So yeah, this would be my concern for the bullish side of things, though this could this could quickly be overcome on Monday, but I'm interested to see what happens on Monday because, like I said, we're in the gap, and this is even the second time that we're in the gap. We're in the gap previously, but in any case, we saw it on the daily. In the gap, came back down through the gap, and then what happened here was on this wick, came very close. The high of this wick was 3743, and I have 38 cents as entering the gap. So it's potentially treating the gap entry point as resistance. And if that continues to be the case, or if it does it again, that would give me concern that it's not going to, at least on this motion, it's not going to make an attempt back into that gap, which would mean that it's not going to try to push through this 53 level and make an attempt up at this 6109 level. But another, that the rest of this motion either needs to play out in base somewhere, or is going to further sell off and then try to find sort of like a new bottom from which to work from. But that's what I'd be looking for. But certainly a good, if we don't look at every single candle, but just kind of look at the swings, good swing up here, caught our level here, 35.72. So at least the levels are holding up well, right? Swing low here, caught exactly on our 30.12 level. And then once again, it's having a hard time over that 35.72 level. So that might be something to note. If on Monday we see a motion up toward or through that 35.72, I'd be really interested to see, does it make a strong motion through that? Can it build any support over that level? That could be a good strong indication of some bullish momentum, still being with it, slash maybe being able to carry it through that 38 level and back into the gap. So that to me is sort of is really important going into Monday if it's able to push back there. And then, swung back here and is trying to base for the moment over this 28.32 level. So we'll see how that all plays out on Monday. NVOS, we might have, volume still there. We might have a really strong indication even pre-market on Monday, how things are looking. So big punch out of the upper bound of the channel here, and what we always look for is a revert to the mid-range of the channel and see what it does. Mid-range tried to hold, flipped it to resistance here, and then pushed off a little bit. So, bearish momentum appearing on the TTM squeeze indicator to be pushing up at the moment, and this is on the hour chart, just to be clear. So is that going to continue to play out, build in bearish momentum, maybe need to stretch to this mid-lower bound of the channel, or who knows, even toward the lower bound of the channel like we saw here? I don't know, but it certainly is, it gives me a little bit of a pause, at least from the bullish perspective, gives me a little bit of pause to want to see it need to reattempt the mid-range of this channel. We could wake up pre-market on Monday and there could be such a large move that it's irrelevant in either direction. So sometimes with these wild swings, these stocks that go through wild swings, the action is already taken before we can sort of watch it play out. But we'll know that early on Monday. But again, that's going to also be assuming that the volume is still there in droves. But this is my biggest concern at the moment, my biggest sort of question mark. What's it going to do with this? Because it's looking like if this didn't get timed out after hours on Friday and had just been allowed to persist, it appears as though this was going to catch resistance and sort of either try to just pin itself below the mid-range of the channel or push down and need to bounce support off of this level or off of this level. So that's sort of my most burning question at the moment as it pertains to the Think or Swim study on NVOS. All right, little sip of coffee. And lastly, but not leastly, GOEV. So our old buddy, GOEV. Let's see where we are on the daily. And then we'll zoom in. And then we'll go to the Think or Swim study. So nice motion so far. I'm always skeptical of these trend line breaks at first because so many times we see things break a downtrend resistance and then not get enough distance away from the trend line itself and sort of just curl back down. As we know, oftentimes it's stair steps up and elevator down. So a stock can often drop much harder, much faster than it can climb. And so that's always sort of the worry with the break of the downtrend resistance in particular. But you see here, you had downtrend resistance, or maybe it would have been more like this, that finally broke about here. And it had a little bit of a peel back, which is what you would expect. It needs to sort of condense and sort of recoil itself to make a big move. Reconfirm support here. It's another good reason why. And then it got the huge push up. So I'm sort of looking for anything that indicates that kind of emotion now. if it were to lose this 47.12 support that it's trying to hold at the moment and clearly flip it to resistance, that would concern me. Because you see here on this candle, for example, as I was trying to build support over this 50.27 level, it wicked through here. So intraday, this could have looked like maybe it was going to, like, this attempted break was going to bust right here. But what happened was, by the time the whole candle was allowed to play out, it had, sort of regained support of that level, and then on the very next day it confirmed support on that level. So even if it wicks through, or if it sort of spends some time below here, I'd be interested to see what it does at this 47.12. Does it push through it? And if it can get to that 50.27, that might, give us an indication of, okay, this is the distance that we're talking about. This is getting distance from the downtrend resistance that it had been stuck under before, and it shouldn't sort of just elevator down and peel itself back to that level. Or does it sort of slip below that 47.12, confirm resistance? That would give me concern that, okay, maybe it's going to sort of retrace and maybe even threaten to fall back underneath that downtrend resistance. But it is getting good distance at the moment, and so I'd be looking for, I feel like this will be a much clearer picture mid to late next week, depending on how much time it needs to take to make its next move, or if it just continues to sort of stair step itself up. That would be obviously fine as well for the bulls. I'm sure they wouldn't sort of shirk that. Yeah, I'm going to put a level in here, sort of taking shape, I would say. Top of this candle body. Let me just pin it there and see how that looks. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Wick through, wick through. Top of this candle body, wick through. Top of the candle body-ish, wick through, top of the candle body-ish. So with limited price action, sometimes the ishes just end up winning, and may need tweaking in the future. We'll see. But, for the intraday, we'd have seen on Friday this coming in 47.12, building support over, and then an attempt at 48.8. An initial fail, but made higher lows here, right? It didn't need to come down and test the full 47.12 level, and continued to put in higher lows, but continued to get stuck and catch resistance to that 48.8 for the third swing attempt here, and then it was finally breaking through on the fourth, and then building support into close over that 48.8. So, good bullish signs there. For the intraday at least. So again, we're going to see if that holds going into the week, or if anything sort of throws that askew, especially if the whole market is maybe moving strongly in one direction or the other based on some larger sort of forces and news items at play. Now in the 1 hour chart, this is pretty interesting because you have a few different things happen. So just a few days ago, you had it leaving the upper bound of the channel, came down and held nicely, the mid-range, brief slip, but then regained support, kind of wrestling with it for several days, and then building support over it on Friday. At the same time, you have this 180 to 200 EMA cloud swooping in to provide some stickiness, right? But then at the very end of the day, it looks to me, it's hard to see, it looks to me that the cloud is here and that it's trying to build support over it. That basically that was the job it was doing on Friday, was trying to build support over that 180 to 200 EMA cloud, at least, as it looks on the hour time frame. And maybe if that's the case, then it's able to confirm that support, that could give it some additional oomph to the upside. Now, at the same time, what makes this even more interesting is several days. This has now gone through basically 3 days of triggering with no fire on the TTM squeeze indicator. Last time it triggered and fired, we had trigger while it was moving sideways, slightly up and then sideways, and then when it fired, by the time the market opened, then it went bang, right? But it went bang in both directions. It went bang and then beep. So something to maybe just be aware of. The time before that, trigger, we'll extend the trigger through here, and then fire, that was nothing. So sometimes these stocks end up in, or not the stock, but the indicator ends up in sort of like a double trigger fire situation where the real move doesn't come on the first trigger and fire, but on the second one. But I'd be sort of skeptical of that with this. I mean, it could happen, but the thing that's interesting to me on this is just so lengthy. This is a long period to be putting in a trigger phase, and also while that price is really just kind of wrestling with, like we said, the mid-range of the channel and converging with the 180 to 200 EMA cloud. So if there's a big move coming up, that cloud could be coming into play in conjunction with the mid-range of the channel, either providing really strong resistance, and you're going to have a strong push down and sell off there, or strong support. We could see a big move up and stretching toward the upper bound of the channel. You do see everything kind of curling up here, channel-wise as well. So really interested to see when that fires, kind of what happens, if anything. All right, folks, that was the weekend stock recap for these 6 stocks at least. I hope that you enjoy your weekend and that you start your week off strong on Monday. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.